Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing a retrospective on Slipknot. Slipknot is releasing their highly anticipated 7th studio album, The End So Far, on the 30th of September this year. So because of that, I'm going to be covering their first 6 albums in this video. So Slipknot is an American alternative metal band that dabbles in genres like nu metal, groove metal, and all that kind of stuff. Not only are they among the earliest bands to tackle these genres, but they're also among the best. Aside from their distinct sound, they're also known for their imagery, specifically their masks, as well as their chaotic live performances. They've had their fair share of controversies over the years, even though most of them are pretty much baloney. You know, their image has been scrutinized by religious groups, specifically Christians. There was the infamous 2008 slashing incident that took place here in South Africa, and of course, the similarities between themselves and Mushroomhead. Personally, I do enjoy listening to Slipknot, but they're not one of my absolute favorite bands ever, you know. You'll never find them in my top 10 or anything like that. I'm not saying they're overrated or anything, but I don't really enjoy them as much as I do some other bands. But anyway guys, let's just jump right into the first album. So, Slipknot's self-titled debut album is often regarded as one of the best debut albums in the history of metal, and rightfully so. While it is, generally speaking, a nu metal album, there's plenty of influences from more extreme subgenres like death metal, thrash metal, speed metal, and stuff like that. The percussion is very extensive, and there's even some hip-hop influences by means of turntables and the occasional rapping from the band's singer, Corey Taylor. Speaking of which, Corey Taylor does it all on this album. He sings, he raps, and he growls, so there's a nice mixture of everything. The album opens with this weird intro that's essentially a spoken word segment on a loop. And 2 of the band's most iconic songs appear on this album as well, Wait and Bleed, and Spit It Out. And the album closer, Scissors, is to Slipknot what Daddy was to Korn. An emotional, raw gut punch. It's very lengthy and there's a lot of screaming from Corey. Admittedly, as much as I love this album, it starts to get a bit redundant towards the end, but pretty much every song is enjoyable regardless. My favorite track is Spit It Out, and my least favorite track is Diluted. So overall, it's an amazing debut for a band like this, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Next up is Iowa, the second album, and one that many consider to be Slipknot's best work to date. And I can agree with that. This is definitely where the band peaked. But there's always the perfect alternative if I'm looking to change my mind on that. Aside from just the music itself, the history of the making of the album is also quite fascinating. You see, Iowa was recorded at a time when all of the band members literally hated each other. And you can feel the frustration in the music itself, especially from Corey Taylor. While Iowa does maintain a lot of the same elements from the self-titled debut album, there's a bit less emphasis on the hip-hop elements and more emphasis on the heavier aspects. You know, there are elements of death metal and hardcore punk. And aside from being even more aggressive than the first album, the band really ramped up the technicality of their sound with Iowa. This album of course features the single People Equals Shit, which is probably the most popular song off the album. It's a good track to headbang to if you've just had a really shitty day. There's also My Plague, which features clean sung vocals from Corey during the chorus. And the final track, Iowa, is yet another lengthy album closer, and this one's about 15 minutes to be exact. And yeah, on the whole, it's an amazing new metal album. But again, like the self-titled debut album, it does get a bit redundant towards the end. Especially since the album is over an hour long, and their longest album to date. My favorite track is People Equals Shit, and my least favorite track is Skin Ticket. So yeah, it's an amazing follow-up to the self-titled debut album, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So from this point onwards, Slipknot decided to broaden their audience by branching out into territories they hadn't explored before. They did this for the next 3 albums, and the results have varied depending on who you ask. But for the most part, it seemed to work out well. You know, they didn't want to simply just stick to the same formula for every single album that they record. And for that, I commend them. You know, it's always nice when bands try out new things. Which is why I can accept bands like Metallica putting out Saint Anger, Megadeth putting out Risk, and Slayer putting out Diabolos in Musica, and so on. Not that I'm comparing any of Slipknot's work to those aforementioned albums, but again, I like it when bands try different things. So their third album, Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses, is another solid effort from the band, and in my opinion, it struck the perfect balance between their roots on their first 2 albums and the experimentation on later albums where they kind of mellowed out and their sound became more theatrical. The album incorporates more traditional song structures, guitar solos, which weren't on the first 2 albums, acoustic instrumentation, and some more melodic elements. The song Duality sees Corey do something totally new as far as his vocals are concerned.
I have screamed until my veins collapse. I've waited as my time's elapsed. Now all I do is live with so much fate. I've wished for the
Vermilion Part 2 is a 100% acoustic song where Corey sings to the point where it sounds absolutely nothing like Slipknot, but you can't help but dig it.
A catch in my throat, choke, torn into pieces.
But don't worry, if you're into the more aggressive stuff by Slipknot, then there's always tracks like Before I Forget.
I am a world before I am a man. I was a creature before I could stand.
There's probably 1 or 2 songs here and there that are kind of forgettable, but the majority of the album is still really cool. My favorite track is Duality, and my least favorite track is the album closer, Danger Keep Away. So yeah, overall, it's a nice change of pace for Slipknot, but I just wish they had maintained this level of consistency on the next 2 albums, so I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So All Hope Is Gone, being Slipknot's 4th album, is often considered to be one of their weakest albums to date. So much so that even many of the band members themselves have expressed dissatisfaction with it. You know, it seemed like a case of rushing an album's production in order to meet a deadline, as opposed to putting a lot of thought and care into it. That's not to say that they didn't try with this album. In fact, I think it's a great album for what it is, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who considers this to be their favorite. This album saw the band shifting away from nu metal and focusing more on the groove metal elements of their sound, while also incorporating elements of thrash and death metal, as well as some of the more acoustic and melodic elements from the previous album, Volume 3. If you're looking for their heavier stuff, there's Psychosocial, which is one of their most popular songs. And if you're into their more mellow stuff, there's a track called Snuff, which is kind of their attempt at a power ballad.
So break up against my stones and spit your pity in my soul.
So think of this album as a culmination of almost everything the band had achieved on the first 3 albums, minus the nu metal elements and the hip hop elements and stuff like that. However, there are 1 or 2 boring songs here and there, and the album as a whole just doesn't pack the same punch as what came before it because it's a bit too mellow for me, and even the heaviest tracks on the album don't have the same energy to them that the previous albums did. And I guess this is due in large part to the fact that All Hope Is Gone was originally intended to be a Stone Sour album. Stone Sour is Corey Taylor's other band, and when you listen to it, it kinda shows. If this was released as a Stone Sour album, I think it would have been better received, who knows. My favorite track is Psychosocial, and my least favorite track is This Cold Black. So yeah, it's not their best work. In fact, I think it's their weakest album to date, but you can still get a kick out of it if you give it a try, and I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. So this brings us to 5, The Grey Chapter. It's debatable whether this album is better or worse than All Hope Is Gone. As for me, I found it to be better, mainly because it saw the band attempting to return to their nu metal roots while maintaining the melodies and more mainstream elements of Volume 3 and All Hope Is Gone. The track AOV has an aggressive, thrashy vibe to it.
Going out, man, now I'll never think the same. But I'm on a doesn't matter, nothing's gonna change. I don't wanna watch another motherfucker die. So it's got it, follow.
And if you're looking for the more melodic and more theatrical stuff, there's tracks like The Devil and I. Unfortunately, the first 3 or 4 songs is where the album kind of peaks, and nothing else comes even remotely close to that level of quality. And even though the band tried to recapture their earlier sound, it still doesn't have the same energy to it that those early albums did. My favorite track is AOV, and my least favorite track is the one that kills the least. So yeah, overall, not one of their best albums, but still a step up from All Hope Is Gone. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. So the last album to talk about is We Are Not Your Kind. We Are Not Your Kind is often regarded as the band's best album in years. It's their most experimental album to date as far as creativity is concerned, and it dabbles in so many different genres. It's best described as a mix of nu metal, groove metal, and hard rock, and it features several elements of electronic rock, rap metal, progressive rock, and electro-industrial. So there's something for everyone. If you want a little taste of the album, I'd recommend the track Nero Forte.
I'm never enough, you let me try. Using me up, dissatisfied. And use another key to the empty spot in you.
And even the intro as well as the interludes consist of these very moody instrumentals. There's 1 or 2 okay songs here and there that don't quite live up to the rest of the album, but the album as a whole is still marvelous. My favorite track is Nero Forte, and my least favorite track is Red Flag. So yeah, We Are Not Your Kind is an exceptional album by Slipknot, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Slipknot's discography. Next time, I'm going to be reviewing their new album, The End So Far, when that comes out, so look forward to that very soon, guys. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Ring the bell. Take care, and I'll see you soon.